In this video, we'll discuss the features on Gabor Mate's face that point to signs of transformation and growth, as well as a marker for lifestyle depletion. Enjoy. Welcome back, everyone. For today's reading, we have Gabor Mate. I think that's how you say his name. If I have it wrong, my apologies. But I came across him on social media some years back, and when I saw his face, I always thought he had a very interesting face. And I'm going to be honest, it was contradictory to what I would have initially thought. And what I mean by that is, typically when we see features, a little bit of face reading, whether we like it or not, is judging a book by its cover. And you have to be very careful to not do that too much, but you want to look for patterns in the face in relation to the personality. And so my initial gut feeling kind of about who he is and what he's gone through and what he does didn't totally link up given his features. So I'm going to talk about that because it brings us back to a pretty interesting point about faces, and the nature of face reading is that the face tells a story, and how that story is told, how we live it, really dictates how our life force expresses and then how we navigate our faces and the development of our faces in relation to our lives. So that being said, if you are new to my channel and you've never seen a face reading and you don't know what it is, please go up here and watch the 5-minute crash course face reading video. That will give you a good overview and orientation to what face reading is, as well as terms and terminology, because this is a branch of Chinese medicine, so some of the terms I might use, you might not pick up or understand if you don't go watch that. And as always, if you're finding value in my content, please like, subscribe, hit that bell notification, and continue to share my videos with anyone you think will find them interesting. So, when I was looking at his face, two things leapt out at me. One was the countenance of his shen, sort of the general look, the vibe that comes out of the face that is immaterial. That's one. Second one was his eyebrows. And then there were some other kind of secondary things that I noticed, but I want to talk about this first, the countenance of the shen. So when you look at Gabor's face, one of the things you notice is this very sedate, kind of droopy-eyed quietness that is conveyed when he talks and when he communicates. So typically in face reading, one of the things you want to be careful of, if you see this sort of listless look that looks very tired and very depleted, there are a few things that want to be on your radar. So out of the gates, just from a theoretical level, this is not necessarily a favorable countenance on the face. The thing this can point to, when the eyes start to get very heavy, the upper eyelids start to hang over the eye, what we can see, there's a few things. One is a repressed spirit, someone who has seen a lot of trauma or been through a lot or very, very high stress levels, and in turn, also an impact towards the heart. Like there can be a sedation or a repression or even physiological or physical problems with the heart itself. The reason I say that is because the eyes also relate to the heart. So it relates to the liver. Also, liver function is seen in the eyes, the whites of the eyes, but you want to pay attention to how the eyes are framed, and that's through the eyelids. So when we're looking at someone's face, the heart in Chinese medicine is what houses the shen, or the consciousness or the soul of a person. It comes through the eyes. So when we see a change in shape with the eyes over many years, when things get a bit more sedate, sometimes that can be actually the heart metrics closing down a bit. Not always a good thing. You want to be very careful of that. So in his youth, when I was looking at this picture, his eyes were considerably brighter and bigger and more open. And as he's gotten older, he's gotten this much more sedate look. And I have seen this look on people's faces who have had heart trouble, people that have had heart attacks. And when they come out of the heart attack, their eyes sit more like this. So I would be putting this on his radar just as an inquiry, saying, hey, have you gotten your heart checked out? Is there any heart disease in your family? And how are you doing inside? How is the heart, the soul of you? How are you managing life? Now, that being said, when I started to listen to his content and I started to really tune into his message and what he's talking about, he's a psychologist and he specializes in trauma and the resolution of trauma. So when I started listening to his content, the shen it expressed differently than I thought it would. This is why it's so important in face reading that you not only look at the features of a person, but you have to listen to what they talk. What does the spirit focus on? What is the nature of speech? What are their words? The shen and the voice, all of those things animate through the face. So when I work with people privately, if any of you ever have, you'll know that I ask for a series of photos, and that is so I can get sort of a basic orientation to your face, but it's not everything. And I don't just give a reading based off of those photos. I have sort of a general primer, sort of a general foundation of what I'm doing, and then I talk to the person and then sort of augment and blend what I'm seeing in the face and what I'm hearing in their voice and in the spirit, and then that's where the lifestyle guidance sort of merges. This is where the rubber meets the road, as they say. So, that being said, when we see this look, okay, this very sedate look, one of the things that you also want to be paying attention to is that oftentimes when we see this, there has been a pretty sizable amount of stress in the person's life. That can be from external trauma, life terrain, losing a job, losing a family, going through really tough divorce, things like that. It can be on the external, and how the emotions of the person process that can actually have an impact on the face when the face looks a lot more sedate. So what I think is interesting about him is that the story that the face tells, what he's talking about, what he's chosen to put his life force into in terms of trauma resolution, I think for one, in looking at his face, my guess is he's probably had some very real dialogue with trauma, his own personal trauma, and I don't know his history, but this would be the things that would be coming to mind in relation to face reading theory. So the thing we have to remember is when we go through trauma, the body, the mind, and the spirit can take a bit of a beating when we go through any kind of trauma. The thing is, yeah, it could show up on the face and we might see it, but what you do with that energy, what you do with that trauma, how you decide to navigate it, how you decide to unwind it, if you do at all, that's very important. And so what we can see in the face sometimes is not this person is traumatized, this person here, Gabor, saying he's deficient and he's run down. It's saying he's likely been to some very dark places. He's probably been into some very real pain and trauma, and having touched that, and even though it had an impact on him, he is likely using that and making something good with it. And that's really what I get from hearing him talk. Now, the other thing that I noticed when he was talking and whatnot, and I listened to him in his content, he's got a very soft, soothing, kind of almost monotone presentation. When we see that, that's very strong water metrics. So the water metrics have to do with depth, philosophy, spirituality, the cosmos, the infinite universe, and how small we are in relation to that, and how we can feel very, very, very small when we realize the grandeur and the size of the universe. So he's also got big ears. So when we see large ears with that watery presentation, this is, according to face reading theory, it's a person who needs to dive into those really deep philosophical concepts a bit more. Will every human benefit from reading philosophy to a degree if they apply it? Sure. But again, face reading says when you have a dominant feature, it just means those allocations are going to help you identify what you should be leaning into to nourish your personality, your personal life force. So that's pretty interesting. In looking at him and how he talks, I found that pretty interesting. He's also got very dominant eyebrows. So eyebrows are the upper representation of the wood element. The jaw is the lower, so you can think of the jaw as the root of the tree, and the eyebrows are the foliage, the branches of the tree. It's what's seen on the outside, the roots are down underground, what is unseen. So his jaw is square, and he's got a pretty strong jaw, but his eyebrows really leap out. And so you want to think the quantity of the energy sits in the root down here, and the quality of what's expressed externally comes out. So when we see these eyebrows, the things I would be asking him, he were a client, we're saying, what's your relationship to anger been like in the past? Are you pretty hot-headed, or were you in the past? And are you creative? And are you expressive? Because that's another kind of like the positive side of those two wood metrics, is you can be very angry and irritable and outwardly loud or demonstrable with your anger. And then the positive side is kindness, compassion, empathy, and also sort of that mad scientist energy, a little bit of like getting your hands into a lot of things and creating and being expressive. So I would be asking him, kind of like, what's your relationship to these two things? Because your features really ultimately in the end are, here's what it says, here are the markers sort of like for the general themes. How are you expressing positive or negative in relation to that? And through conversation, we kind of augment like, okay, these are things to lean into, things to consider. So very dominant wood metrics. Now, he does have quite a few wrinkles. He's old. I don't know his age, but I know he's older for sure. And he's got a lot of wrinkles, right? As we age, we get wrinkled. But he's got a lot of pretty prominent wrinkles under the eyes. And he's also got some pretty heavy bags under the eyes. When we see this, this is usually liver stagnation. The liver is usually a compromise to a degree. It doesn't mean like death or anything, but it means like the liver has had some pretty pretty rigorous trials and tribulations, let's say. So when I see that, I would be talking about liver health and what that means. And the liver, remember, according to Chinese medicine, is also responsible for the free flow of emotion in the body, how well we shift gears from emotion to emotion. Because in the East, they say your emotions should be temporal. We shouldn't sit with them for too long. The only emotion that you can really come back to as your baseline, like home base, is peace, stillness, tranquility. That's what keeps the heart and the mind and the spirit healthy. And then we kind of dabble into all of the other emotions, joy, rage, resentment, laughter, whatever the thing is. We should shift through those, but come back to a place of peace. So with all of these wrinkles around the eyes to these lines that kind of bridge down into here, a lot of the lines, when they start to bridge down and bleed into the cheek, this sort of is, in face reading theory, are the metrics for like sadness that's been carved into the face. So I would be really curious to ask him and to talk to him about his history with trauma, with his emotions, where he's been, because from his face, the story that his face tells is there's probably some pretty deep, dark sadness in there. And we all have sadness, right? So please, like, every human is going to experience sadness, but sometimes, sadness as a theme in our lives, like how we live, what we've gone through in life, are going to hit us a bit harder than other people. Some of us, it's going to be rage or anger that really taxes our body. But I would be asking him these questions. And then from there, how do you express and share that into the world in a positive way that's beneficial and nourishing to you? Last few things I'll touch on are his wrinkles. So he's got wrinkles down here through the cheek. These little, they look like almost like permadimples to a degree. That, along with the dimple in the chin, if we see that, are these markers for attention. That doesn't mean the person has to be the center of attention, but typically when we see this feature, according to face reading theory, is the person handles attention pretty well. They can be an educator, or they like to have people listen to them in relation to what they are sharing or what they are teaching. And again, do all people want to be heard and listened to? Yeah, but not all of us are going to want to be in front of a camera, talk, teach, educate. Some of us, that's very hard. It's very difficult to do. So he's got those, and it looks like since he's in an educational position and teaching people and sharing and doing that kind of thing, this plays to what he's doing with his life, what his face says, and that crossover and congruency that we're looking for. And the last one that I noticed is this line here. So if you try to make a horizontal wrinkle here, it's tricky to contort your face to try to make a wrinkle there. And so we want to pay attention to the center line of the face. They call this the river of life. And if we see horizontal or vertical lines are more of a red flag. They're a little more severe. Horizontal is less so. But when we see a line here, this is lifestyle depletion. So this is usually a person that's worked very, very, very hard, excessively so, like a workaholic type. This can definitely happen. It doesn't have to just be from that. It can be dealing with a shitty divorce and the things that go with that for 10 years, right? Someone taking a lot of money from the other person. This mark can show up too. It doesn't have to be overwork, but it means that some of the rhythms are consistent enough in your life that this is starting to be depleted. So again, I would be kind of asking and wondering, in relation to that, I would say did you work insanely hard for many years to the point of exhaustion or, excess by your estimation? And then from there, that's where you kind of step in and say, okay, so what are the Jing fortifying foods that can replenish the body? What are the things that you can be doing to sort of mitigate that? Because when it shows up on the face, it's just hey, this is what's happened. This is the story that's being told. So how do we remediate that some as you go through life and get older? So I think that's all I'm going to say. As always, there's a lot I could say. And when I see people's faces, I'm like, oh man, I could be here for a long time. But I think this is a good overview of where he's going. He's also got great forehead lines. So I will say that. Those are the storyteller lines, a person who usually is very persuasive and is able to articulate their ideas well. And from what I've heard, he does that pretty well. All right, y'all. That's all I've got for today. Thanks for your time as always. Take care.